You can order the Middle English Teacher's Notes for the autumn term, price £1.75, the Anthologies Storehouse 1, price £4.50, and Storehouse 2, price £3.50, and the Mr. Magus is Waiting For You software, price £20.38, by contacting your local ITV company. Or send a cheque or postal order to Schools Office, Thames Television, 149 Tottenham Court Road, London, W1P 9LL.
In this book, I wanted to illustrate how a child experiences war without really understanding it. When wars begin, people often cheer. The sadness comes later. The men from the town went off to fight for Germany. Rose Blanche and her mother joined the crowds and waved them goodbye. A marching band played, everyone cheered, and the fat mare made a boring speech. The soldiers in the lorries sang songs. They smiled and winked at the children as if they were old friends. The children always waved back. Rose Blanche often went shopping for her mother. There were long queues outside the shop, but no one grumbled. Everybody knew that food was needed for the soldiers, who were always hungry. Many things did not change at all. Rose Blanche still played with her friends. She did her homework after supper and went to school early in the morning with her lunch in her satchel. Nobody knew where all the lorries were going, but people in the town talked about them. Some said they were going to a place just outside the town. One day, a lorry broke down. Rose Blanche saw two soldiers trying to repair the engine. Suddenly, a little boy leapt from the back of the lorry and ran down the street. A soldier shouted, "Stop, or I'll shoot!" The boy ran straight into the arms of the fat mare. The mare was immensely pleased with himself. He dragged the boy by the scruff of the neck back to the lorry. One of the soldiers was furious and shouted at the boy, who burst into tears. The boy was thrown back into the lorry. Rose Blanche saw other pale faces in the gloom when the door banged shut and the lorry drove away in a cloud of diesel fumes. Where were they taking her? She followed the lorry right through the town. She was a fast runner. She knew all the shortcuts. Winding streets forced the lorry to go slowly. Rose Blanche took a shortcut through the forest where bare branches scratched her face. The road was below her. The lorry was a long way ahead. She was so tired, she felt like giving up. Then she stumbled into a clearing and could hardly believe what she saw. Dozens of silent, motionless children stared at her from behind a barbed wire fence. They hardly seemed to breathe. Their eyes were large and full of sorrow. They stood like ghosts, watching as she came close. One of them called for food, and others took up the cry. "Food, food, please be our friend. Please give us something to eat, little girl." But she had nothing to give them, nothing at all. The cries died down, the silence returned. The winter sun was setting. The chilly wind made the barbed wire moan. Rose Blanche turned for home. Their sad and hungry eyes followed her into the forest. Rose Blanche told no one, not even her mother, what she'd seen. All through the bitter winter, she took extra food to school, jam and apples from the cellar. And yet she was growing thinner all the time. At home, she secretly saved the food off her own plate. In the town, people were no longer patient when they waited in the queues. No one had enough to eat, except the mare, who was as fat as ever. Rose Blanche slipped away from school as early as she could and, clasping her heavy bag, headed towards the forest. The children were always waiting for her by the fence. When they took the food, careful not to touch the electric wires, their thin hands trembled. Rose Blanche learned their names, told them hers, and told them all about her school. The children said little in reply. Huddled together, they stared through the fence into the distance. Even at night, Rose Blanche made her journey to the forest. Others travelling under the cover of dark, soldiers, thousands of them, exhausted, wounded, dispirited, poured back through the town and on into the night. There was no singing or waving now. Then one morning, the whole town decided to leave. People were frightened. They carried bags and furniture and pets. They loaded wheelbarrows and carts. The mayor was one of the first to leave. He had taken off the bright armband he'd once been so proud of. That was the day Rose Blanche disappeared. Her mother searched frantically for her all over the emptying town. She asked everyone she met if they'd seen her daughter. She's probably with friends ahead, they told her. Don't worry. Pack your bags and come with us. Thick fog shrouded the forest, and it was hard to find the way. Rose's feet were muddy and frozen. Her clothes were torn, and at last she arrived at her usual place. She stood by the clearing as though in a dream. Everything was so different. It was hard to think clearly. Behind her were figures moving through the fog. Tired and fearful soldiers saw danger everywhere. As Rose Blanche turned to walk away, there was a shot, a sharp and terrible sound which echoed against the bare trees. Meanwhile, there were different soldiers passing through the little town. Their language was strange, their uniform unfamiliar. And though they were tired, they were cheerful. The war was almost over. Rose Blanche's mother never found her little girl. As the weeks went by, another, gentler invasion began. The cold retreated. Fresh grasses advanced across the land. There were explosions of colour. Trees put on their bright new uniforms and paraded in the sun. Birds took up their positions and sang their simple message. Spring had triumphed.
During the 2.5 years it took me to complete Mufaro's beautiful daughters, I began to realize that I was actually capable of creating images that I wanted to see all my life. A long time ago, in a certain place in Africa, a small village lay across a river and half a day's journey from a city where a great king lived. A man named Mufaro lived in this village with his 2 daughters, who were called Manyara and Nyasha. Manyara was almost always in a bad temper, and she had been heard to say, "Someday, Nyasha, I will be queen, and you will be a servant in my household." Nyasha kept a small plot of land on which she grew millet, sunflowers, yams, and vegetables. One day, Nyasha noticed a small garden snake resting beneath a yam vine. "Good day, little Nayoka," she called to him. "You are welcome here." Mufaro knew nothing of how Manyara treated Nyasha. Nyasha was too considerate of her father's feelings to complain, and Manyara was always careful to behave herself when Mufaro was around. Early one morning, a messenger from the city arrived. The most worthy and beautiful daughters in the land are invited to appear before the king, and he will choose one to become queen. I know Nyasha would grieve to death if she was parted from you. I am strong. Send me to the city. Let poor Nyasha be happy with you. No, Manyara, I cannot send you alone. Only a king can choose between two such worthy daughters. Both of you must go. That night, when everyone was asleep, Manyara stole quietly out of the village. In her hurry, she almost stumbled over a small boy who suddenly appeared standing in the path. "Please," said the boy, "I am hungry. Will you give me something to eat?" "Out of my way, boy! Tomorrow I will become your queen. How dare you stand in my path?" After traveling for what seemed to be a great distance, Manyara came to a small clearing. There, silhouetted against the moonlight, was an old woman seated on a large stone. "I will give you some advice, Manyara. You will see a grove of trees. They will laugh at you. You must not laugh in return." "How do you know my name? How dare you advise your future queen? Stand aside, you ugly old woman." Just as the old woman had foretold, Manyara came to a grove of trees. She looked up at the trees and laughed out loud. "I will be queen, I will be queen," she chanted as she hurried on towards the city. Nyasha woke at the first light of dawn. As she put on her finest garments, she thought how her life might be changed forever beyond this day. Her thoughts was interrupted by loud shouts and a commotion from the wedding party assembled outside. Manyara was missing. Everyone bustled about, searching and calling for her. When they found her footprints on the path that led to the city, they decided to go on as planned. Though anxious about her sister, Nyasha was soon filled with excitement about all there was to see. They were deep in the forest when she saw the small boy standing by the side of the path. "You must be hungry," she said, and handed him a yam she had brought for her lunch. The boy smiled and disappeared as quietly as he had come. Later, the old woman appeared and silently pointed the way to the city. Nyasha thanked her and gave her a small pouch filled with sunflower seeds. The sun was high in the sky when the party came to the grove of towering trees. Their utmost branches seemed to bow down to Nyasha as she passed beneath them. Arm in arm, Nyasha and her father descended the hill, crossed the river and approached the city gate. Just as they entered through the great doors, the air was rent with piercing cries, and Manyara ran wildly out of a chamber at the center of the enclosure. "Do not go to the king, my sister. Oh, please, father, do not let her go," she cried hysterically. "There's a great monster there, a snake with 5 heads. He said he knew all my faults and that I displeased him." It frightened Nyasha to see her sister so upset, but leaving her father to comfort Manyara, she bravely made her way to the chamber and opened the door. "My little friend," she exclaimed, "it's such a pleasure to see you, but why are you here?" Nyoka replied, and there before Nyasha's eyes the garden snake changed shape. "I am the king. I am also the hungry boy with whom you shared a yam in the forest and the old woman to whom you made a gift of sunflower seeds. But you know me best as Nyoka. It would make me very happy if you would be my wife. And so it was that, a long time ago, Nyasha agreed to be married. Mufaro proclaimed to all who would hear him that he was the happiest father in all the land. He was blessed with 2 beautiful and worthy daughters, Nyasha, the queen, and Manyara, a servant in the queen's household.